Don't you just love when you get a chapter that it's exactly what you were asking for? So in the last chapter, I mentioned that I mentioned that I wouldn't be mad if the fight ended there, but I believe that it should have been longer than how it was in chapter 33, just because like a chest pierce by itself I don't think would be enough to kill Bakuyaraku. And I thought it was funny because I got this chapter, I was questioning if I got his name right, because there's a part where Jack Joe calls him a different name in the past, but I just assume that's because he didn't actually know this dude's name in full. But the reason partially though is because when you look at the verse, and this is before I get in the chapter itself, if you look at the structure of the verse, we haven't really seen a demon lord in reality on display. Because when you think about it, it's like we had Mado in the first chapter. He was a chapter 1 opponent. He was literally for exposition of the verse. Sada was fodder. Moroku was, again, he just was to show the line between the other, like the demons, like between a top demon and a demon lord, as well as the bottom of the demon lords. And then obviously that makes the other ones easier to assess because we know where their bare minimum is. So when you look at like stuff like that, and then we gauge the opponents we've had. Obviously Azudaroth, but he's a great demon lord. He's not like, he's above these guys, so he's not what we're going to be trying to gauge because we know he's way above them. So we're trying to figure out the middle point between what we've seen and where we know that these guys aren't at. Because obviously they aren't at Zudaroth level, but the people that they are above, we didn't really see too much of them in a fight, so it's hard to really say. The only thing we know is, again, that Moroku was 13th and Sada was 12th. So it's like, okay, well, maybe Mado was 11th or something, or 10th, because we still are missing a lot of those numbers in that general upper half. But I really was hoping just to see a little bit of this guy's capabilities more, because there's one, again, I wanted to see a demon lord in action without just getting destroyed by somebody that is much more powerful than them. But also, I've mentioned this the last couple chapters. I'm very curious as to see more of what the demons themselves are going to be presenting in the verse. It seems like they, at least from what I can tell, and this is what we've been shown so far, it's not, say, like another series comparable, easy. It's got devils and demons of his, like Black Clover. Another Jump series. They have the same. Well, it seems. I would assume the demons and devils are going to be the main super primary of this series, whereas in Black Clover it came in halfway through and then it's kind of is, but then later it's used for a different power. You know what I mean, though? But it's like you see like the verse, they have their demons and devils and whatnot, and in this verse you have the same thing. It's just different styles and whatnot. But in there they have, like, okay, you have magic and whatnot, but then you have the devils all have their own variant of things. It's like, oh, you can have rock magic, but then you could have devil rock magic, which has its own things, or whatever. But in Kiyoshi, we know that the Exorcist, we know that their thing is called Percept Power, and it goes into all their abilities. But the demons, we don't, again, have much depth of their side of things, and we've only gotten a pretty fair dipping into the Exorcist powers as of recent, for the most part. But I don't think, at least from what we've been shown, I don't believe it to be a very complicated structure. But the demon powers, like I said, we don't know too much about them. It seems to me, and I've talked about this as well, it seems to me that it's going to be more so they have their own raw power, like this black energy that they use for their attacks. And on top of that, they have just, they utilize things that come for their specific demon variant. Like Bakuyaraku, he's got 6 eyes and 6 arms, so he's got this super, attacking everything around him, lots of like skill technique based things. This dude's running around as Shiva, and I was really hoping we would see more of him in this fight, and it wasn't just going to be the last chapter and then it ends, because it's like we need to see one of these guys really in display, from both understanding the verse. This is Nihon and Jack Joe's first fight. This is our first real Demon Lord fight that isn't going to, one of them just being blitzed and destroyed. So I thought it had great value in showing us these things. Plus, it just as like a small side note, we had last chapter, Bakuyaraku used 2 name techniques, and it's like, man, I need at least one more. Don't give the guy 2. I did think it was badass that once Nihon and Jack Joe were like, yeah, we beat the guy, and then the guy just, Bakuyaraku is standing up. You see him not only relatively fine, but he's got another weapon. He just apparently pulls out all these other swords and stuff. Um, but it's interesting to me that in this whole fight, Jack, you're getting an explanation of like Jack, Joe, and Nihon's power, and obviously, they're them fused and having these factors, in a augmenting way again with the skill of the two of them, the skill of the two of them, the power of the demon, and the bond between them. And we know that the bond between them is already going to be super high. Jack Joe's extremely powerful. The biggest crutch here is Nihon and his just fighting capabilities in general. And Nihon's Exorcist grasp is still just literally fresh as hell. So it's like, okay, well, we can see the potential. Like, we can see they clearly are strong. I mean, this is a 5th level demon lord, and Bakirok even mentions that he, like, in this state, at the end of the chapter, when they get their full strength and where they're at right now, it's greater than what Jack Joe was prior. And again, I think that just makes sense when you take, it's like you have his power and you're augmenting it through a system that, because these two have known each other for so long. And on top of that, I think that with this chapter, it made sense that he was able to draw out more strength from like that just emotional breakthrough. Just I think it made a lot of sense between the two of them, if there was some form of underlying conflict that Jack Joe wasn't being honest, or at least in full depth about, that once resolved, it would like something in them would click for their fusion, and they would be able to work just that much better, because this small crutch that was in there is now wiped out. But again, I really like this guy's fighting style. I think he looks really cool. And one thing I noticed is his horns. Let me go back to the last chapter. I believe his horns changed. Yeah, his horns changed a little bit at once he got back up, because they're like ribbed, similar to Jack Joe. But once he gets back up, they're just straight black, and they're just pointed. Like, all those like ridges are gone. And I think it's just really cool that again his whole thing, it's not like, oh, I have this ability that every time I hit you, it applies this, and it's like it goes to this long explanation attack. No, the guy's got 6 eyes. He can see in all these different directions. He's got 6 arms, and he's a good fighter. Like, I really like the early feeling of this, because it fights like this, it gives it so you don't know what the weird dynamics are, because Jack, Joe, and Nihon, for the most part, they have, enhanced stats. They've got a weapon. They've got like the extra set of arms coming out of the back that they can use for their melee attacks, defense, movement. I'm a big fan of just like the fact he'll go for like a big arm attack. It's like one of those ones where it's like the guy moves, but it's to grab something behind him and then pulling him towards like a high speed at him, where they're going to like for a piercing attack with the spear. I think this, like, the simplicity of the fighting styles is so good, because it opens up with like it's really simple in the start, so it gives it a lot of potential of areas to grow, but it also is very easily digestible. And I've talked about that before, is the powers in the verse and the combat style of Kiyoshi is I really love the characters, but it's right now, I would say probably that too. It's got my favorite abilities and whatnot in any of the new gens, just because like stuff like this, it adds a very high level of power diversity without having to, again, oh yeah, I have to top every power that comes up with some other weird one. And it's like, yeah, cool. I look forward to when a verse gets to have, yeah, I can pull out these crazy broken abilities, and the characters might have they'll have abilities themselves that can combat it and like respond. But when you're at an early point like this, and it's like the guy is just, he's doing energy attacks and like AoE like pulses. He did that one where he's like Wicked Storm, and it didn't look like he just like slashed everyone around him or something. He did like a raw power like pulse, but it was in a way that instead of it just being like a straight like dome of energy, it would this streaks that normally I would assume that wouldn't be more offensive. But you see Akari, and one of these I mean, you see Yoko Ono too, but like you see one of these energy bolts like go through her and do internal damage. I think that's just cool, because he's doing kind of like almost like this, kind of like a Neji Byakugan style rotation idea, where it's like you're just doing a defensive but also offensive thing around you, but instead of again being in like a like a bubble kind of pierce or a bubble pulse is you're doing like a concentrated piercing attack, which is kind of cool because it's also, I would imagine, it'd be easier to dodge, but it's going to do more direct damage. As well as in the fight, I was very happy to see Yoko contribute, even though she's hurt, and she was able to do even just small amounts, like go and block attacks, so Neon and Jack Joe didn't die at the points where they were vulnerable. I think stuff like that is just always good because it gives characters who, in a spot where it's like, well, it's a little unfair for her because she's outgunned. This is a character who is, at a much higher level, I would imagine, that she's ever fought one-on-one, and she doesn't have any form of big cards to play similar to what Neon and Jack Joe have with their new form and whatnot. But here he is, he's just, again, doing like really cool moves. There's like parts where he puts his where he like crosses his arms and he's using just his other forearms and he's slashing through them and doing his thing. It makes me really look forward again to the other fights that are coming up because I know that their abilities are going to all be really neat. And then when we get to say like Mukurojima, because he's a scientist, I would assume that he's gonna be the one that has a couple weird powers and stuff like that. I think it'll make powers like that stand out. If anytime you run into a character, you generally are gonna have, okay, what is their thing? You assess what maybe like, oh yeah, they've got wings and they've got like a tail that shoots something. It's like, okay, well, you can kind of figure out what your opponent does because their demon species seems to determine a lot of how they end up fighting. And then besides whatever their physical things that they bring out, similar to how Bakiraku can do all this direct combat with his multiple arms and see all around with his multiple eyes, it's like, okay, well, if you have a character that, you can note from them looking at them, oh, they have this thing. Okay, like again, if you saw a character with multiple arms, you're like, okay, I fought a guy kind of like this before. He's probably going to have his own variant of style of using all these extra limbs and whatnot. But it's like, okay, well, what if this person had a different style fight? Like, what if instead of like trident and swords, he had like nunchucks or like a flail or something that just made it a little bit weirder to fight? And I think that'll be really cool if we have some demon species that are reoccurring. Like if we get like if like, oh well, these demons with all the arms are like, oh, this is this sub race, or maybe it's specifically like with these cloth masks or something. But I really like just the display of the two of them in this chapter. We did get some backstory on Jack Joe, and it's funny because he called him Yokura Baku, which is like, I wonder if that was his name before and he changed it when he rose in rank, because he does directly confirm that Jack Joe was the previous 5th rank, and he wanted to surpass him and did a lot. He doesn't say like if he was what rank he was when they were still in. Only Jack Joe was 5th, but he talks about how Jack Joe, like he was full of raw power. Like he held his spot for raw power. He didn't eat human souls. He didn't do a lot of this other stuff. I would imagine part of the reason would be just guessing is if he's not eating human souls, I would assume that human souls have some form of direct correlation with a demon's level of prosperity and power. Like if they're like, oh yeah, you eat a soul, it gives you like 1% more power or something, or depending on the soul, maybe it gives you like a certain power boost. But if Jack Joe is this powerful, if he's 5th off of raw, his just raw power without having to do any of that, you'd say, okay, well, he's, I would assume, always been this strong, and his options are to do, to kill and steal the souls of innocent humans. Maybe he can go after criminals, if he wanted to kind of like switch it in his own favor. But if he's not doing something that makes him stronger and he's already at the spot, I would imagine in his brain, he'd be like, well, I could climb the ladder, but then I have to do all, I have to go and hurt all these people. And he has an interest in humans and the style that they do. Because like if you were born already at this power spot and you never had to climb for it with no drive, I would imagine it would just feel weird. It'd be like being really good at a sport you have no interest in whatsoever, and then you find something, like maybe you're like, man, I am a amazingly good golfer or basketball player or something, but I hate it. And it's like, well, I want to be a baker. And so you have like some guy who's the size of Michael Jordan who can, make threes with his eyes closed, but he's like, I don't want to do this. I just want to make rye bread. I want to make some banana bread. Like, it's just this dude is like, I hate my life for my talents because I wanted it to do it somewhere over here. But it's like, I would assume it's the same style because if his thing is primarily like, wait, you're powerful, you're good at fighting, you're XYZ, but that's not what you want to do, I would assume it'd be a little frustrating, especially with the demons, because we know that the demons, like, their culture, it's way more so at the lower levels, but they do have, they clearly have people that aren't just like crazy evil demons. Like, they're some of just, they're outliers. They don't want to be involved in that. They kind of just want to do their thing. And in Jack Joe's case, he talks about how he thinks manga is really cool, karaoke, bowling. There's just stuff from the human world that he's interested in. Again, if you are a character who is just naturally really powerful, but you don't care about power levels and stuff, finding out this stuff that in another world that's more interesting to you, I would imagine would be very intriguing, especially if he's hundreds of years old. Because if you think about it, like, if you spend centuries in a system that you're like, man, I hate this, but I'm stuck in it, and suddenly you're like, across the way, you have all this stuff that you think is way more worth your time. Why would you stick here? Like, why would you want to be in the spot? And it's same thing with like Bakiraku. I thought it was cool because he's one of those characters who he just sees like the fighting and combat style, everything. It's like, this is what I value, and he's mad about Jack Joe. He's mad about Jack Joe doing this. But the thing is, I feel like for his character, and again, he's clearly a bad guy. It's not like he's secret. If he somehow becomes an ally, I'd be surprised. Like, maybe Nihon will get a second demon, or he'll come back at some point. Probably not. I think he's dead. But if I was him, you gotta look at it more so of like, why did he do this? Because when it comes to like a person like this, I personally believe that if you have a character that in you can say it real life, if they're stuck in their own ways, but they have all this talent and capability, but they want to put it towards something else, it'd be like, okay, well, why is that? If Jack Joe was already really strong, he didn't want to progress the way that other demons are, but he now is contracted to Nihon, and through this style with their form and their ability, I want to know if we're gonna get an official name for the form. But with this whole setup, he now has grown much stronger. So like with this dude, I would, like, if I was him, I would be more so like figuring out, like, is what he did the right idea, or should I look for a similar method, or should I look for something that is more so akin to me? Because once you hit I would assume, and this is just something that I've seen in a lot of fiction and obviously whatnot, but like, once you hit a wall, and you can obviously, it's like, oh, I'll train to get stronger, to get over whatever this problem is, blah, blah, and you need to find a solution. There's always that idea that whatever it is isn't as direct as like training, and it's something more tied to your brain or something that's subconsciously hindering you. Because Jack Joe mentions that since he found out about that he was a demon and a demon lord, he was really scared about what he was like before he lost this memory, like if he used to be cruel and dangerous. Because he's like, well, what if I lose control or gain my memories back and I want to hurt people and I become a threat to my friends? Because that would be really scary. Like he's essentially like, I don't know if one day like my memories come back and I'm going to be gone, and this other idea of me, like the original me, is going to be a threat to my friends. I really thought that was a great tell for his character, where he's talking to Tsurugi and everybody's like, hey, if this happens, like, don't hesitate to exorcise me. Don't hesitate to get rid of me, because at the end of the day, Jack Joe doesn't want anything bad to happen to his friends, and he doesn't want to hurt anybody around him. He wants to protect his squad and his buddies and go to school. Well, he's not going to school. He's supposed to, it's just a side note. I wonder how many times Nihon and him cheated on tests, because Jack Joe could just walk across the room and just read off of everybody's papers and then walk back like, Nihon, it's this one. It's this answer. It's this one right here. Just put it in. Just as a side note. But when you have a moment like that, and it's something that in his mind, I would assume just a tremendous weight is just washed off. I would only assume that it's going to just be like, oh, relief, finally, sudden relief. And because of that, like I said, it's like if just whatever that weight is that was keeping back their current full strength, and obviously, like I said, they're still new to his power, but it's like after that they were able to harness the full capability of right now of what they're able to do. I mean, it's such a strong and a good character moment that goes again into expanding Jack Joe and Nihon, but also shows that they their potential and capability is very, very high. The only thing right now is just Nihon's exorcist skills and whatnot. But also, like in this scenario, you see Jack Joe's own personal problems and hesitations that was making it a little harder for them. But then after that, like they kind of lock in, and even though they're hurt, and then clearly in terms of raw combat, they're outgunned. It's good that they had some aid, but when it comes down to it, like they're still attacking at the end. They're going for like big attacks, just going for more of those giant like claw to face moves. Like I said, grabbing onto stuff like light poles and stuff, and trying to like do these quick piercing lunges at him, and then just while doing it again, like they miss. I thought it was very cool. Like he missed with a spear thrust, but then one of his arms came around and slammed into Bakuyaraku anyway. And it's like this. It's just a really neat freeform style that I think is badass. But he's doing his thing. He just goes for a higher level of his 6 Infernal Spears of War, which he used in the last chapter. But in this case, he used it with his split trident. So he's got like a combat staff and just like the poking end of it, and then 2 swords. Which also, I really like that his swords are different styles, because this essentially means he's using 4 different weapon combat styles at once. But Nihon and Jack Joe don't falter. They're still getting hurt, but they're doing everything they can just to kind of stand firm. And man, I've mentioned again, this is just something I want to bring up just really fast, is I love the powers in the verse. It's got my favorite overall powers right now out of any of the new gen. Galaxis is probably my number 2, because I think the dragon tails and stuff are really cool. But I'm a big fan of just Jack Joe and Nihon's whole form. And their form is just really badass looking, for one. I mean the cool spear. I mean the base design is great. The way that they use their attacks, it's just, again, it's very simple, but it's so freeform that makes it just got so much room to grow. Like the idea, it's like, okay, he does this hand thing to charge up the spear. It's like, okay, well, what's going to happen when he gets to points where maybe he doesn't use his he's not using his direct arms to do this. Maybe he has his cool Jack Joe arms grab the spear, and then they fuse, and then he's got like one giant mega, almost like a stinger kind of going on, like a scorpion. I don't know, but it was just badass in general. I can't wait to see the next fight. This was one that I wanted to see the most, because I thought I've been mentioned since the whole contract started way back. I mean, it's like way back. It's like, what, 20 something chapters ago. What is it now? We're at 34, so I mean it's like what, like 20 something, almost 30 chapters. But I mean, it was in a way that like he was one of these characters that I looked as like, okay, this is, and I called the same thing with the contract. It's like, okay, this is probably how it's gonna work, just because I thought that made sense. That's usually how summoners and stuff work in every series. But it was one of those things, like I said, that I could see the vision, and because of that, I've been just standing by patient. I've been standing by patient for this, because it's like, Akari will get something eventually, but I think it makes sense that she's going to be way later, because she doesn't have any like crazy known power things going on for her. Like, we knew that Jack Joe was really high level in capability, and we know that him and Nihon had obviously a very strong bond, so it's like, okay, it was just a matter of time waiting. Akari's is a question mark, we don't know. Other than Jack Joe, Nihon, I would assume that next we're either going to go to like Tsurugi, Kyoka, or Hitsugi. Hitsugi might get saved for later just because he's the rival. I mean, this was a really strong start, so if we get to another really serious fight, I honestly, I'd love that. I think it'd be great. But other than that, I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Bye.